Oh, hello. Let's talk about humility and low self-esteem because there's a fine fucking line between the two. Low self-esteem often happens because we've let some dumbass and their shitty opinions or observations of us into our head. And sometimes we're the dumbass, judging ourselves based on inevitable failures. Low self-esteem is a program that runs in the background until you notice it running. Once noticed, we have to haul it into the forefront of our fucking conscious mind and stare that motherfucker down. It's hard to do though because that program triggers negative brain juice, which triggers an emotional response, and we generally have an aversion to all that playing out, and we suffer because suffering is an aversion to what is. We've just got to endure those passing waves of emotion that in the moment feel permanent by realizing every fucking thing is temporary so as to not exacerbate them. And then we wade and push through those frothy feelings to the fucked up daisy chain of thoughts targeting the genesis of our self-esteem issues, hiding in the shadows of memory. In order to observe your thoughts, you have to create an actual observer, you, and that which is observed, thought. Doing so will give you some distance because you can't solve a fucking problem from within the same state of mind in which it was created. Hello? When you see it for what it is, an adopted code of information, that's all, then you can consciously begin to overwrite it with positive code. The computer is filled with whatever information we put in it. It doesn't give a shit if it's labeled good or bad. So too is your wrinkly pink meat computer filled with either default unfiltered bullshit or consciously chosen code devised to cause a positive and healthy reaction. Maybe you suck at something, or maybe you suck at a lot of things. So fucking what? We all have strengths and weaknesses. Don't fall into the trap of hanging your hat on inadequacy. Find the things you're good at. Remember the things about you that are good and positive and that feel good to think about, and use that code to overwrite the old shitty code. And if you're thinking,
there's nothing good about me,
then congrats, you have your first bit of bullshit code to overwrite. If you really think this, then take a minute to see how this thought is connected to either buried memories of how others have regarded or judged you, or dim fantasies about how others will regard or judge you in the future, and make the decision that you're going to stop giving a fuck about other motherfuckers and their shitty opinions, and just maybe you need to stop giving a fuck about your own shitty opinion of yourself. Who we are is just an intricate and tangled network of stories we tell ourselves. If you keep telling yourself the same shitty story, you're going to wear a deeper groove into your mind, and just as a trickle of water will eventually cut a fucking mountain in half, so too will you create a canyon of despair within which all other thoughts will flow. So, don't be a dumbass. Humility is defined as modest or low view of one's importance. Now, if you have low self-esteem, I don't think humility under this definition is your current path. You should be looking for ways you are fucking great to counterbalance the ways in which you feel like shit. Just don't be an asshole about it. Let's call that humility, okay? The other side of this coin is if a person has too high of an opinion of themselves and their importance. From the outside looking in, it might seem like their life is more enjoyable, but is it? They tend to make it shitty for everyone else around them because they have to maintain this lofty status somehow. Do you find yourself constantly banging against other people's shit because of a deep desperation to hold on to your own shit? I'm talking about opinions and beliefs here. We all do it, it's human nature, but an overinflated sense of importance requires constant pumping to stay inflated. Constantly working a mental peen pump doesn't sound enjoyable to me whatsoever. One common way to maintain this pedestal of inflated self-opinion is through comparison. A person has to see someone as low in order to try to feel high. They will stand upon the back of another in order to feel elevated. These are the dumbasses I spoke of earlier who damage people's self-esteem to try to inflate their own. There are, of course, nuances to this, and a person with low self-esteem might try to cover it up with an act that appears confident, but you get the idea, and if you're watchful, you can tell the difference. If you have low self-esteem, you probably know it. It's fucking hard to miss, but if you have an overly inflated amount of self-esteem, you likely don't know it. The way to tell is by observing your reaction to people who challenge your ideas or beliefs, actions or opinions. I mean, we all tend to defend, but how hard do we do it and at what cost is telling. We can all light the fuck up when challenged, not just overly inflated egos. The difference is whether we are able to take a fucking breath and look at the data and observe past our reaction and see what the other person is saying. If all your mind does is try to find ways a motherfucker is wrong for the sake of feeling like you're right, then that's a fucking clue, boo. Humility is a balance. It doesn't mean you feel lowly, doesn't mean you're fucking perfect and have a perfectly balanced sense of self. Humility is the ability to put information before your self-created idea of who you are so that you can reasonably decide if the constant influx of information we receive, as well as newly birthed thought chains, will be used to either break or build who we think we are. I find the best thing to know is that we don't fucking know. That way you're not constantly in a state of trying to convince others or defend against opinions that you have not incorporated. Think of a bubble. It's mostly comprised of air, the atmosphere. A very small percentage is the soapy rainbow sheen that surrounds it. Because of the soapy spherical sheen, we can point to it and say, that's a fucking thing. When the bubble pops, where's the bubble? It's the entire fucking atmosphere, of course, something it always was and always will be. And it's fine with that. The only thing that finds that prospect terrifying is the fucking soap. Ego is our bubble. It's not a villain, it's a structure, so an ineffable, wakeful emptiness can be a fucking thing ever so briefly. The ego's job is to exist as a thing, and it attempts to add on to itself, to become a tangible container for an intangible, cognizant, experiential awareness. So think of the ego not as compartments, but as a singular bubble skin. And every single fucking thing that we add to it is incorporated into the totality of the sheen of who we think we are. Doesn't matter what it is, political opinion or religious belief or just some fucking thing you heard somewhere and just decided it sounded good and started believing the shit. Whatever it is, it becomes part of the entirety of the bubble. And although it may be a small, inconsequential thing, when someone challenges it, the bubble perceives it as a threat to its totality, because that inconsequential thing has become inseparable from the bubble skin itself, and we go apeshit, because on some level it threatens our very existence and lights up the egoic terror of annihilation. It's just trying not to pop. How about we redefine humility, not as low opinion, but of appropriate view of the scaffolding in our minds that gives us a sense of self and works to convince us that reality's out there and we are things separate from it in here. To be truly humble is a delightfully calm and relaxed state when we can manage it, because there's nothing to defend or fight. Imagine that shit. To face the possibility of annihilation will give you humility. The reason I talk about space and emptiness and shit is for a perspective that can result in humility. Eternal darkness, be it in space or death, will help you to not accidentally become a self-important asshole if you can get through the whole fucking existential crisis thing. It's not easy, but that's how it's done. Perseverance and remembering to fucking do it. Remembering is the hard part because we let our minds fall into a default based on our interpretation of outer circumstances. Humility will allow you to observe the egoic bubble so you can appropriately make decisions about whether to add to it or take away from it, because you're not terrified of popping. If you're not observing it, then you are it, and you'll defend your perceived existence tooth and fucking nail. Think of how many religious wars have been fought, and it's all just folks trying not to pop. I used to have a random alarm go off on my phone to remind me to pay attention to my own existence, to fold my awareness back upon itself. I even got a fucking hand tattoo to remind me of the base of my existence, a cognizant field of awareness, so that the phenomenon of my life can be viewed from within this field and from this field, because the ego bubble is demanding as fuck, and thoughts really want to be thunk. I even made a symbol for myself, and fucking swag meant to be a reminder to whomever wants to be reminded. I wasn't going to mention swag in this because I thought, ooh, I don't want to be judged as that guy or some greedy fuck, but I realized that's not actually humility. That's just a daisy chain of old thought code that's worried about being judged by motherfuckers here, and so I said, fuck that. I'm proud of this shit I've created because I did it for a positive reason for myself and to share with others. I'm talking about you, motherfucker. I'm not, however, going to tell you a fucking hat or shirt or phone alarm or hand tattoo is going to make you fucking enlightened, because enlightenment is not perhaps a thing we chase. Just maybe it's what we already are within our bubble. Not a thing discovered, a thing remembered. So, fuck it. Try to remember who the fuck you are, however you can. It's so simple and yet so hard to do. So do it however the fuck you can. The air inside the bubble is the same air as the entirety of the atmosphere. You're not the sheen. That's temporary. The air inside is you. Pop goes the wee soul. Alright, that's it. And no, I'm not going to tell you to go buy my swag. I'm not going to talk about it at all. I'm not the fucking boss of you. I'm going to drink this coffee, though. Fuck it. Own your shit and remember thy fucking self however you can. Toodaloo.